Hey everybody, and welcome to Hunto Plays Games. I hope you're doing well. Today I've got a video for you that outlines some of the games that I played during 2024. I had an incredible year of gaming this year, and I wanted to share some of those experiences with you in hopes that we could talk in the comments about some of them, or maybe even add some to your backlog for 2025. This will be a list of 10 games in no particular order that I enjoyed throughout the year, and I'll be sharing my thoughts and experiences with them. This is my personal list, games that I played throughout the year. Not all of them are new releases, some of them are quite old. So I hope that you enjoy as I take a look back at the games that I played this year. Up first, we have, probably not very surprising considering the background, Balatro. This was a game that I picked up on Black Friday at GameStop for $19.99 new, and ever since then my wife and I have become addicted to playing. We almost play every night before we go to bed. My family really enjoys playing board games, so I think I would kind of liken Balatro to a deck building game or an engine building game, kind of like Dominion or Wingspan. It might be one of my favorite roguelites I've played. I really like how easy it is to pick up and play. You don't have to get ready for a run. I felt like with Hades, one of the things that I always kind of shied away from was like, okay, I'm going to sit down and try this run and I have to get my mind ready to do combat. Well, with Balatro, you're kind of just making hands of cards with what you're dealt and trying to see what jokers you get and how to best, form your hand and form your deck to get high scores. I also want to give a shout out to the soundtrack and visuals because I feel like it really helps you kind of get in the zone while you're playing. And, overall, it's just been a really great way to end the day the last couple months. I think since we bought it on Black Friday, we've put close to 38 hours into Balatro. That kind of tells you how much we really like it. I love that my wife and I can play it together. We normally sit on the couch and we're like, okay, should we go for this joker or should we go for that joker? Or, is it best if we delete these cards or turn them into clubs? If you haven't had a chance to play Balatro, I would definitely recommend it. It's been a really great gaming experience for me this year, and one that I'm glad I had. And for $19.99, it was definitely a steal. I think it might be cheaper digitally, and maybe you can catch it on a sale, but definitely earned its Game of the Year nomination in my opinion. All right, up next we have what I started my channel for, Xenogears. At time of recording, the only other two videos that are up on this channel are two live streams from last year where Brent and I tried to start playing Xenogears, and well, we finally finished it. It took us over an entire year. I think we finished in November. So what I can say is Brent and I played Xenogears in the worst possible way possible. We played it over the course of a year in like 2-hour increments with months in between, just kind of as our schedule allowed us to get together and try to play it. We almost completed disc 1 playing it, but we were really kind of playing it for the story aspect, and it has a really high encounter rate of enemies. So what would happen is we would go to play and we'd sit down and, he would get off work, we'd have dinner, and then we'd start playing. It would be like 8:30 and we would just kind of be bombarded by enemy encounters. And by the time we got to the story bit, it would be like 11 o'clock, 11:30, and both of us were about to pass out on the couch and not really able to kind of fully understand what the story was trying to say. So I definitely think with those month-long gaps in between and trying to get to the story content, and then, the story is pretty dense. It was a really challenging way to play it. So at some point we eventually decided just to watch the remaining cutscenes off of a YouTube video, which was better and helped us get through it. I don't think we would have finished it if we hadn't done that. But overall, we just played it in the worst way possible. I also kind of feel like maybe we weren't smart enough. Sorry, Brent, don't mean to insult your intelligence, but I just don't know if we were smart enough for the game. There are lots of references to psychology and to religion, and I just didn't pick up on any of them. It didn't help that a lot of that was buried kind of late at night, right before we were going to fall asleep. But, definitely an experience that I'm glad I had. I'm glad I played it and experienced it with Brent, but I would definitely see myself coming back to it in a couple years and having a lot more positive experience with the game. That being said, the ending was really solid. It had a lot of good twists. It would have been more impactful if we had a better sense of what was going on. But, overall, there is probably the most ambitious video game I've ever played. It is packed and chock full of some of the most ambitious, writing and storytelling that I've seen in a game, and it's really incredible that it even exists. Really like the soundtrack by Joanne Hogg. There are 2 tracks on the soundtrack. If you have Apple Music, you can listen to them or maybe search them up on YouTube, but really fantastic tracks by her. And there's a lot of impressive technology, like the kind of 3D spinning the environment around, like with some sprites. I think it was a really great game. We just kind of didn't have the best experience with it, but nevertheless, I still recommend you check it out if you can. I know that copies physically are a little pricey and hard to come by, but it's a really cool experience that I'm glad I had, and I definitely recommend it, especially if you're a fan of the Xenoblade games like Brent and I are. It's cool to see how much of that DNA existed in Xenogears, and they carried over into Xenoblade, especially with the Future Redeemed DLC that recently came out. Up next, we have Famicom Detective Club Imio the Smiling Man. A couple years ago, when Nintendo decided to remake the Famicom Detective Club games, I played those for the very first time, and they were actually some of my very first experiences playing a classic adventure or visual novel style game. And so I kind of have a soft spot for the Famicom Detective Club games, and I think Imio was disappointing for some people, but for me, I really enjoyed the reveal. The marketing, I think, had people overhyped or expecting a different type of video game than what they got. But I thought it was a genius move to kind of have this creepy Imio guy with the bag on his face and the creepy smiley face to hype up a series that really doesn't have a lot of exposure and hasn't had a new release in decades. So I thought the marketing for the game was fantastic. I was excited when I found out it was a Famicom Detective Club. It's kind of something I thought that they would revisit since they did the remakes. I hope that it's a series that will continue to get entries in every once in a while. But I will say it's a slow burn. I won't deny that, but some of my favorite games are slow burn games. That's one of the reasons I love Persona 3 so much, is I feel like that's a slow burn game, but it's so worth it in the end. And I feel the exact same way about Imio. Like, it's a slow burn, but when you get to the ending and there's several twists along the way, it's so impactful and it's really a worthwhile experience. I would definitely recommend you check out the demo if you haven't. I think that'll give you a fair idea of if you're gonna like it. Some people don't like the gameplay where you're kind of going through this menu system of like talk, speak, go through these questions, and you have to do some of them over and over again. But that has never really bothered me. I feel like it makes sense to kind of revisit topics after you've gained new information. This entry was also really cool. It was the first time that you got to play as Ayumi, your kind of co-detective that you work with. So having those 2 different kind of main characters was really cool also. If you like mysteries and you don't mind a slow burn, I would recommend checking it out. Like I said, the demo at least, if you're not willing to commit to the full game, which I understand. But definitely a highlight of the year was just the fact that we got another Famicom Detective Club game after so many years of the series remaining dormant, and it was just a really great return. I felt like it was a lot more hard hitting or a lot more serious than the other 2 games were. So definitely enjoyed that and would recommend it. All right, next up we have Yakuza Kiwami. I was so excited to play a Yakuza game. I continue to hear how fantastic they are. I continue to hear how they are pioneering AAA gaming with their mix of serious storytelling and mini games and side quests that are meaningful and add to the characters and the stories. And I gotta say, Kiwami did not disappoint. It was an incredible experience, and I'm so excited to play more Yakuza games in the future. I know that with Yakuza, it being a series, there is some debate about how you decide to play them and in what order. Just so you know, my order that I've decided to play is Yakuza Kiwami 1, Kiwami 2, and then 0. So I kind of thought that would be an interesting way to play them, and so that's the order I'm going in. But with Kiwami 1, I was so impressed by the excellent design of the city, Kamurocho. It felt like a real life city. There are people moving around, going in and out of stores and shops, and It just felt really realistic. It also felt like they got the proportions of all the buildings correct. Like you enter a building and it's the same size on the inside that it is on the outside. I mean, just really, really great. Going through the game, it felt like watching a whole season of a TV show. Like you start off the game and things happen. And I'm trying to not go into spoilers for any of the games that I'm discussing here because they are so story based. But just the initial setup and premise of the game is so compelling. And you get to see Kiryu kind of, without trying to spoil things, you kind of see Kiryu lose this future that he kind of had planned out for him, and see how he maintains his dignity and his morals after that. And it just was a game that made me want to play more after the credits rolled. It really was an impactful game for me this year, and I'm really excited to see what the rest of the series is like. My initial interest was playing the Like a Dragon games, and I've heard those are great. In particular, their references to Dragon Quest, which is a favorite series of mine, as you'll see a little bit later. But I wanted to start, at the beginning of the series before that to kind of see what led up to that series or that new take on the series. And certainly glad I did. I got them on sale. I think I bought 1 through 6 on sale for like $40. I think they were like 2 sets for $19.99 on the PlayStation Store digitally. And just that one game, to be honest, it was worth that. Definitely recommend checking out the Yakuza Kiwami if you haven't. It was a really great experience for me this year. All right, I'm going to kind of put 2 games together for this next one, and that's Trails from Zero and Trails to Azure. Last year, I played my first entries in the Trails series with the Sky FC and SC, as well as Sky Third, and I really enjoyed those. Joshua and Estelle and the whole gang, they really, are some of the favorite gaming experiences I've had in the last couple years. I thought the story was great. I feel like it really goes places, and I was a little apprehensive to see how Trails from Zero and Azure were going to go. I tried not to look up too much about them to see what people thought, just so I would be going in blind without any bias, and I was nervous for no reason. The Sky trilogy was exceptional, and the Zero and Azure series, I mean, they live up 100% to what Sky set up. I'll try not to go into any spoilers, but holy cow, when I was looking into how to start Trails, I saw a lot of comments that were like, have FC downloaded and go ahead and have SC ready to go. And that would be my recommendation for Trails to Zero and Trails to Azure. Go ahead and have that second game ready, because holy cow, it ends on this like massive cliffhanger. And then the second game, it feels like, okay, we went again, almost like similar to Emio, kind of a slower burn at the start. And then things just go a million miles an hour in the second game. And if you kind of like that storytelling where you kind of get this slice of life style at the beginning, and then you establish yourselves in the characters, and then the second game sets up a whole lot of things and it goes places, then I definitely recommend playing through them. I thought the combat was a lot more improved than the Sky trilogy. I love the characters in Zero and Azure. Just overall, a really great experience. When I finished Trails to Azure, I thought the ending was a little bit rushed, and I was a little bit let down by that, but I'm thinking that the ending of this game will be expanded upon in the next arc, and it took everything I had to not immediately start the Cold Steel arc right after finishing this. So that's on my 2025 list to play, is the Cold Steel games. I'm behind. I started last year. And if you're not sure about jumping into Trails, next year's Trails First, I think is what they're calling the Trails in the Sky First, is what they're calling that new game. I would definitely recommend you try that out. It looks to be really good from what I've seen from the trailers. And it's a great series if you like storytelling and an overarching narrative. So I would definitely recommend that. All right, up next we have my very first Vanillaware title, and that was Unicorn Overlord, which the title has grown on me over the last couple months, but Unicorn Overlord was a really surprise hit for me. I at first saw the trailer, I think in a Nintendo Direct, and was blown away by the graphics and the art direction of the game. I thought it looked beautiful. I remember the first time seeing the food that was in the trailer and kind of later learning that that was a signature Vanillaware kind of tell that it's a Vanillaware game is by the look of the food and the graphics. And there's just some really stunning artwork in this game and thoroughly enjoyed it. The story is kind of reminiscent to me of classic Fire Emblem, where you're kind of gaining new units constantly. I really enjoyed how that was a steady feature throughout the game. You know, you start with your units, and almost every chapter, every other mission, you're adding somebody new to your army as you're trying to liberate the continent. And, you know, one of my favorite Fire Emblem games are the Path of Radiant and Radiant Dawn games. And it really reminded me of that as you're kind of gaining allies as you go across this country and trying to liberate the different towns. I liked the units. I liked that you could kind of group them, and, you know, really the customization aspects of the unit and the characters really made it so that you could create some powerful and fun units to play with. So I really enjoyed it. I did find towards the end of the game where things got challenging, I realized that you could just reorganize your units and completely change the outcome of the battle. I'm not sure if that's still in the game or if they've patched that out, but it would be kind of funny. You know, I would go from me completely being obliterated and losing to moving one person one square over and then killing the other unit. So that did take away some of the challenge towards the end of the game. But to be honest, I just really enjoyed completing the game. I enjoyed playing it and seeing what it had to offer. I got the true ending, which was kind of interesting. There are multiple endings, and I found that out when Brent actually just recently finished playing Unicorn Overlord, and I was asking him about the ending, what he thought, and we had kind of two really different experiences with the end of the game. So definitely some replay value there if you're interested in that. But overall, it was my first time playing like a real-time strategy game. I normally play turn-based strategy games, kind of like Fire Emblem. Next year, I'm thinking about playing triangle strategy. So that's more my wheelhouse, but I really did enjoy the RTS kind of combat in Unicorn Overlord and had a great time playing it. Okay, up next, as I alluded to earlier, is my Dragon Quest game for the year. This year I played through Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince, which I think released last year in 2023, and wow, this game was just a hit of nostalgia for me, because growing up I played through the Dragon Warrior monster games on the Game Boy Color, and when I saw this game was being released, I was just like so excited, because it had been years since I'd played through the Dragon Quest Monsters games, and you know, a lot of those have not been re-released on the Switch, so you have to have the Game Boy Color cartridges to even play them. And so I was so excited in this game. You know, it doesn't perform super well on the Switch, but I didn't care. It was just one of those, like, this was a childhood game for me, or this was a childhood series for me that meant so much that I got to play another one. If you've never played the Dragon Quest Monsters series, you're essentially taming or breeding or fusing monsters that act in battle for you. Your character doesn't have combat like the traditional Dragon Quest game, so it's almost more like a Pokemon type game where you're kind of doing monster collecting, but you have a team of 3 or 4, I can't remember off the top of my head right now, and you're kind of training those guys up, and they're learning new spells, and you know, they have all of these abilities that they can learn, and then you can fuse them almost like a Shin Megami Tensei style monster fusion, where you can fuse them together and get stronger monsters. But there's always a risk reward there. You know, you have a team that's working really well, and you know, do you fuse some of your guys together and get a level 1 monster that you're then gonna have to train up, but they will be stronger and have better abilities? You know, there's some risk reward there that was really interesting. The auto battle mechanic in this game was really good. I thought the AI did a great job of battling for you. It was a really great game to come home from a day of work and just kind of turn your brain off and do some grinding. It is a very grind heavy game, but I do think that the auto battle system really helped make it not feel like a task. It was just kind of sit back, turn your brain off, and enjoy looking at the amazing monster designs and just kind of experiencing something that I've not since my childhood. I also just want to say that it was really cool that this game was based off of Dragon Quest IV, which is one of my favorite Dragon Quest games. It was really cool to get to see that cast of characters in 3D and get some additional story content from Sorrow's side. I really hope that we'll get a Dragon Quest IV remake in the future. Dragon Quest III HD 2D is on my short list coming up, but definitely have a really big soft spot for Dragon Quest IV and hope that we get to see that soon. All right, next up we have an undisputed must play for any RPG fan, and that's Chrono Trigger. This was my first time ever playing Chrono Trigger, and I'm just gonna say it's as good as you've heard it is. Period. It's as good as you've heard it is. Play Chrono Trigger if you haven't. The dream team between Square and Enix really did deliver a true masterpiece. It was interesting to me at the end of the game to scroll through the credits to see some of the biggest name in role-playing games, and it really does read like a who's who of RPGs. One of the biggest draws for me kind of trying to go through Chrono Trigger this year, and maybe it will encourage you to add it on your list for the future, is that it only takes around 25 hours to complete. There are multiple endings depending on your playthrough, but it should only take you 25 hours to get through the first go. And for me, that's kind of like a really good sweet spot for playing a game, especially an RPG. I talked about the Trails games earlier, and I probably put close to 100 in each of those, and they can be pretty long. But 25 hours for an RPG that gives you a full RPG experience. It didn't feel only 25. It felt fulfilling to play. It was really incredible. There's a solid cast of characters. And one thing that I was really impressed with is how each one has their own personality and story moments in the game that most RPGs from the 90s and maybe even today, struggle to get. I really felt like each character had their time to shine, and it was great to kind of get to know that cast throughout the game. I think one thing that helped the story stick out was the way that the combat and the narrative kind of played together. In the combat, you have a tech system that allows 2 or 3 characters to work together and team up and do more powerful moves that have better effects at the risk of potentially getting more damage because you're using those turns simultaneously. But the effects typically outweigh the danger. You're kind of like, can I heal one character now, or do I wait a couple more seconds to try to heal the whole party and get that bigger boost? And so definitely a lot of push and pull in combat with the system that they have there in the ATB, but really enjoyable combat. And I also think the story, music, and visuals were really terrific. I played on the Nintendo DS because that's the only system I was able to get it on, and even then the visuals and music are incredible. I think there's some really memorable tracks. It's just some really fine work, and I hope that one day, I know that everybody says it, but I really hope that we'll see a remake. I think there are so many lessons you can learn from playing Chrono Trigger. It's a 25-hour RPG, and I really think it kind of gives you a guide to what a perfect RPG is and a way to accomplish that. So I hope that it'll become more available in the future. But if you haven't played Chrono Trigger, you need to do yourself a favor and give it a try, because it really is just as good as everyone says it is. All right, our last game on the list today is Thank Goodness You're Here, which is a fun little indie game co-developed by Panic. A couple years ago, I really loved their Untitled Goose Game. I even bought a play date to play some of their games. I need to get back to that because I didn't play as many as I had hoped to play, but really a great gaming experience. I think it's the perfect length to play in one sitting. It can be played in 2.5 to 3 hours. And I also think it's a perfect game that you could potentially play co-op on the couch and trade the controller off to somebody else. There's not a whole lot of technical demand in the game as far as controlling goes or combat or anything like that. You kind of walk around and interact with your surroundings and try to complete tasks for people in this village, and you kind of do that in the most chaotic way possible, kind of similar to Untitled Goose Game. So if you were a fan of that, I think you should try this one. Definitely try to get it on sale if you're not sure about it, but if you love British humor, if you love dry humor, you'll enjoy this game. There are a few running jokes and moments that will make you question if they really just did that, and they did. There's a lot of really funny moments in this game, and it can be hard to balance funny in a game, but I think they do a really great job of it here. Well, that's going to do it for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed. If you've played any of the games that were listed in this video or have any recommendations for me of games that I should try, let me know down in the comments down below. If you found a game that you're interested in playing and added to your backlog, you're welcome, and I'm sorry. Everyone's always trying to tackle their backlog, but there are some really great games on this list, and I hope you found something that you might be interested in playing. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.